Okay, everybody, I'm hanging out with one of my best friends here. This is Luke. He has been here for ever. I've had him for quite a while, but I was reminded of that we have to remember that the horse trainer, Solstice Pecile, I think is her last name, is going to court tomorrow for dragging a horse down the road tied to the back of her truck while it dragged its back feet and essentially was abused. She's been charged. She's going to court, and it's incredibly important that anybody that's around that area can attend and hopefully be able to speak up or something like that, or at least show the system that it's really important to deal with horse abuse in a very strong way. I can't show the video that she put up. She actually filmed herself doing this to a horse, which is what got her caught. But I did make a little animation, so maybe I can show that, because YouTube bans, or doesn't ban it, but essentially limits and restricts who can watch the video because it is a bit graphic. So we don't want that happening again. It had far less reach when that happened, so hopefully this will pick it up. I'll put the link to that down below, but supposedly unless you're logged in, you're over 18, you can't actually watch it anyways. But it's a big deal. She dragged a horse behind her truck while her stepdad drove, supposedly. This is wasn't there, I don't actually know, but this is the opinion that's out there. And then filmed herself being mad that the horse was bleeding from its back feet and squirting blood. It is insane that somebody would even think that that's a good idea to take video of and put on social media and not get called out. Obviously she has a selection of friends that are like, haha, that's funny, or that's crazy, or that horse is stupid, or something like that. But anyways, caught, charged, going to court tomorrow, January 11th, 2023. So this is just a quick reminder of that, because my video is not visible, and hopefully nobody's forgotten so far, but there you go. It's fun out here. We're having a lot of fun. We've got Lena and Mr. Wild doing their thing at the moment. And Luke is currently nibbling on my shoulder, because that's what he does. Anyhow, so we've got to get some justice for, it's not just that horse. Supposedly she's hurt some other horses here and there, and so as such, you know, people have to step up. The public has to step up and tell the authorities. You know, it's just not cool. He's not gonna kick me. For anybody new here, he's not bringing his butt around to give me a kick. He's just looking for a scratch, like they all are. So anyways, as cute and amusing as Luke is, it's a very serious subject, so there you go. The information will be posted in the description. The last video will be posted in the description. And if you have any questions or thoughts, comment down below. Here he comes. I know, buddy. Gotta get a brush. Okay, that's it for this one. And I'll see you guys in the next one. So yesterday I became aware of another horse abuse case here in Canada, actually, by this young lady over in Ontario named Solstice Pecile, I think is her last name. And she decided it would be a great idea to tie a horse's head to a truck and drive the truck and drag the horse down a concrete road. Now, if this sounds like, are you sure? We're really sure. She took video of it, and there is very, very clear objective proof that she did this. So as I've done in the past with some of the horse abuse cases we've come across that are high profile, like Anika Schlew in the Olympics, we got Sarah Moulds over in England, and Mark Todd, who literally took a branch from a tree and beat a horse while everybody laughed around him, just so the horse would go into the pond. We want to understand what happened, why it happened, and why do these people do these kinds of things? What can we do in the future? So hopefully we can demystify the psychopathic behaviors that has led to the damage that was done to the horse, and hopefully to a very hefty fine of a maximum of $130,000 Canadian, and or 2 years in jail. Without further ado, if you are sensitive to this kind of content, I encourage you to skip ahead a little bit, but we're going to show the video here of what she did to the horse. It's very short, but to the point. So unfortunately, it didn't stop there. once she got back to Wishing Stone Farms, which is a family-run facility, and we have to think about who was driving that truck, because it wasn't her. She then decided to do this. Now, when she did get back to Wishing Stone Farms over in Ontario, that seems to also board dogs, horses, and trains horses, she reacted in such a way that can only be described as sociopathic and psychopathic. Anybody that looks at an animal that is squirting blood out of their feet and calls the animal names has a very serious problem. I'll discuss this in a little bit. Let's talk about the horse. So I think it's really important to understand the damage and the severity of the damage done to the horse based on dragging it by a vehicle. We can probably guarantee this is not her first time, and I imagine it's not the first time for the person who was driving either. But these are very serious injuries that I think are done to the horse, even though actually the horse is in good care right now. I've seen a video showing that the horse has been taken away and is in the care of, I believe, the previous owner. So that is good news. So just to say, the authorities were notified pretty quickly when she posted this online, and she was quickly charged with cruelty to an animal and will appear in court next year, January 2023. And I'll put all the details in the description if anybody happens to be in the area and wants to go visit that. Now, if we think about how a horse is built, the average horse is about 1,000 pounds, and all of that weight is sitting on about 20 square inches of space. 4 hooves, generally about 5 inches square of space on the ground, and that horse placed all of its weight mostly on the back 2 feet, if you watch the video, which I very much watched it closely because I reanimated it in 3D so I could understand fully what's going on. And that means that 2 of the feet bore the brunt of 1,000 pounds of pressure on a very abrasive concrete ground footing while being pulled along. And that's not the only thing. We also have to consider the fact that this horse was pulled by its head. So all 1,000 pounds, on average, was being put on a small surface area of rope on the back of this horse's head at its poll. Essentially, the top of his neck, the back of his head. A very sensitive structure. You know, what truly amazed me was the amount of time this horse spent on its back feet, 2 feet, sometimes 3, rarely 4, and every once in a while 1. Imagine the amount of heat and friction and the abrasiveness of the concrete on those hooves as it was dragged with 1,000 pounds on those small surface area for the weight for the ground. It just absolutely amazes me that this horse chose to do that over walking, being that it was probably incredibly painful. So it comes as absolutely no surprise whatsoever that the feet were then squirting blood, as she said, based on the fact that I've worked on feet for an awful long time. I know what's inside of them, and I know based on the video, we can see objective proof of exactly where he was dragging his feet, that likely the heels and the bars and the frog and probably the heel bulbs and probably parts of the back of the legs was also severely abraded away. And in turn, every time that horse probably took a step, it would squirt out blood. She did manage to wrap them, but while making fun of the horse and complaining about how much blood was all over the floor, she certainly wasn't having a veterinarian out giving medical care. All things to think about. And to be honest, the fact that the horse was still standing there after all of that is absolutely amazing. That it wasn't just on the ground in pain, not able to stand up at all. Now, the secondary issue that we have to think about for this poor horse is the fact that it was hung from its head. Now, I'm pretty sure many of you have seen, and if you haven't seen, maybe you will see one time in your life, horses that get stuck on halters. They have their halters left on and they get stuck on a tree or a post or something like that, or somebody ties their horse up and that horse freaks out, ends up hanging itself. Almost none of these horses pick themselves back up. Now, I have a hypothesis, and I haven't proven this, and I don't know anybody who can prove it, but I think that when horses get hung by the back of their head like that, they actually go into a form of sort of mild paralysis or full-out paralysis, where they just check out. Now, we do know that prey animal do have that effect where if you render them helpless, they simply go limp. And I believe that part of that has taken effect. If you watch this horse being dragged, you can see that its tail is completely limp and dragging on the ground. That's highly unusual for a horse. If they're got energy in them, if they're trying to move, they're trying to do something, usually their tail picks up, but not this horse. Which leads me to believe that even if it wanted to kind of pick itself back up, it actually had a lot of trouble or couldn't do it. So without having a proper vet come in and make some examination public, we can't really come to conclusions of what exactly happened or how the horse felt or the damage that was done, but we can make some pretty decent assumptions that very, very, very likely there is going to be damage to the back of the head, the spinal column, the ligaments and tendons that live up there. And I would imagine this horse had, maybe still has, a pretty big headache from it, let alone all the psychological trauma that is going to come with it as well, not counting, of course, the feet or the back end of the body, which I would imagine went under extreme stress. So I want to talk a little bit about the psychological effect that somebody must have had on a horse, where when it was being dragged by its head, it decided not to walk. And I'm sure plenty of people have said, why didn't that horse just walk? Even my daughter said, why didn't the horse just walk? And my thought process goes to the fact that when a horse doesn't want to go with somebody, they just stand there or they will pull back. And I can only imagine what this horse must have gone through with this girl before the truck, where she thought, you're not going to come with me, I'm going to tie you to the truck. We talk about draw and drive a lot here on this channel and all the training that we do with horses, whether or not they want to be with us or not. And that horse had to be in a space in its head where it says, I want to go with you so little, I'm willing to drag my body across concrete and have 1,000 pounds on the back of my head. That's how little draw this person had. And then, of course, all the psychological and physical and physiological effects come from after being dragged. So it leads to the idea that if somebody had come to the conclusion that they need to drag a horse around, they've most certainly done quite a bit before that to get that horse to do the thing that they want. Which leads to, how did this happen? So I believe that horse abuse or any animal abuse is a slow and methodical thing. Apathy is built over time. I don't know if anybody really goes into working with animals thinking that they want to do some damage. And I would imagine, sadly, that Solstice probably at one point loved animals. She doesn't anymore, as we can see clearly, but at some point, I would imagine it was there. And apathy for animals comes over time, where people do things with them and they're not getting what they want. They're not getting the things that they expect. They don't have enough time and they get angry. And in time, they employ more heavy-handed tactics. And we see this all over the place in other parts of the animal world. Take dogs, for example, with shock collars and those spiked collars and other tools and methods that are abusive. The horse world is no different. We see it all the time, and it looks very natural, which is why it was so amazing to see Anika Schlu beat up on her horse in an arena full of thousands and thousands of people and millions watching. And she just went to town with her crop. Now, it's not accepted. Very few people do it, especially out in public. But that slow and steady progression of getting the crop out, maybe putting the spurs on, maybe getting an extra chain, maybe getting a slightly longer lever on your bit, maybe getting a slightly harsher bit. All of these things lead to one step after another, to the apathetic response that humans have when a horse or a dog or any animal doesn't do the things that they are supposed to be doing according to that human. Now, this apathy can't really live long if the people around also don't either completely discourage or speak up or leave. And it's my understanding that this young lady has a group of friends that are trying to support her, and she's also defending herself that she hasn't really done anything wrong. And I think that's definitely what enables plenty of animal abusers to continue doing what they do. That just means that the people around also are very apathetic to another living, breathing creature. If we take the same very simple example of Anika Schlu beating her horse, all she got at the time was a whistle. Nobody came out and grabbed her off of her horse. Nobody took the horse away from her. Nobody said, get off that horse immediately. you're out of here and your horse is going the other direction. So the complacency of the people around, whether it's direct supporters or indirect supporters, like the public in the competitive world, it's with that further apathetic responses to pain and abuse to horses continues. And the same thing with Mark Todd when he was beating the horse with a tree branch. Everybody around cheered and laughed when the horse finally jumped into or leaped into the pond with the rider on its back. And that kind of response, that kind of complacency, that kind of willingness to go along with the person doing the damage to the animal is what encourages and empowers those people to continue doing it, and not only do it, but to go so far as what Solstice has done. She actually took video and posted it online while making fun of the animal. That mentality is crazy. Now, it's of my opinion, this is my personal opinion, that Solstice has most definitely been abusing horses for years. Based on everything we kind of know about humans for the most part, she's supposedly been in this world forever, since she was a kid. We can probably make a decent assumption she's liked them at one point, but then stop. You don't go from liking and being kind and empathetic to animals to dragging it down a road with its legs and feet dragging on concrete and bleeding afterwards to making fun of it, taking video and putting it online. It doesn't make any sense. So we know that she is probably a chronic horse abuser, or we can make a very good assumption. Maybe not know it, but there are anecdotal stories coming out of how she is. So we'll see how it all plays out. But in this case, we have clear and perfect proof that shows what she did to this animal. So the question is, how do we deal with this as a society, as a whole? And I personally believe that it requires diligence on our part as the public to call out and share and make sure that the people who are doing the abusing are really out there into the public. They're really being held to a standard that says, we won't accept this. We're not going to continue to support and allow these types of activities to happen. And anybody else who's thinking of doing it should also not think it's going to be okay either. Because the results, which is why I'm hanging out with Gracie, the results are clear. It can take an awful long time to deal with issues, psychological, physiological issues. The back of that horse's head is probably going to be very, very sensitive for a very, very long time. I mean, I don't know. I'm not there, but I would guess so. And just like humans, horses have PTSD. They're going to have some kind of post-traumatic problem that is really going to affect them for the long term. It'll inhibit their ability to be educated, the ability to be safe, especially around other people. What do you want? Gotta have the ears, eh? And we have to hold every single professional or every novice or anybody to this high standard. Otherwise, we're never going to make a dent. And the authorities that are going to be stepping up and doing the fining, they can't slack off. They can't not give a good, solid fine. In Canada, there's a maximum fine of $130,000 and or 2 years in prison. I don't know if she deserves that whole amount. If she got it, I wouldn't feel anything other than, well, cool. Because it would send a very, very clear message to anybody that thinks that they should be dragging a horse down a concrete road, shaving off his feet while yanking on the back of his head, full 1,000 pounds with a truck. They'll be getting the message that that kind of stuff in this society now, I mean, how can we be so far backwards? You know, we could treat them like that. They're animals, they're living beings. They're breathing and alive. They have feelings and thoughts. And look at this thing. This horse alone is yelling at me. She has thoughts. She thinks they're important. And somehow I have to convince her of a different way. Hey, you can find a little peace and quiet inside your brain. And it's not going to come from beating them. It's not going to come from dragging them. It'll come from kindness, understanding, and patience. Work. So That's it for this one. I'll see you guys in the next one.